Finished the 13th chapter, getting ready to start the 14th chapter. But when we began this study in Revelation, I mentioned that at one time, somewhere along the line, we'll go back into the prophecies of Daniel 7, 9, and 12, but also the Olivet Discourse, which is the premier teaching on this. And that's what we're going to do today. The Olivet Discourse is comprised of verses of Scripture in Matthew 24 and 25. Probably for today, I'm just going to concentrate on sections from Matthew 24. Remembering as we go this, that when we started this book of Revelation, the first 5 words of the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ. Remember the word revelation? Apocalypto. Apocalypto means to take away. Calypto means the cover. Revelation, apocalypto, means to take the cover off and look inside. To be able to behold things that are coming. Things which were, things which are, things which are yet to come. This is nowhere more prominent than in the Olivet Discourse. This happens after Jesus had just left the temple for the last time. He would be dead in 3 days. This is his last great teaching prior to that great teaching in John in the upper room. And up to this time, when I was reading Joshua Parker's commentary on this earlier this week, and he began the teaching on Matthew 24 with the following analogy, the following imagery of imagining a great, huge river that's miles wide. And it's just moving irrevocably, irresistibly, slowly, but smooth. Just little sparkles of light dancing off the water. It's moving on, but then it comes to a point where it starts going down very quickly. And there's jagged rocks, and there's a 300-foot drop. And hundreds of tons of water a second are dropping down and crashing and roaring, and mist is coming up, and light's coming through the mist, and there's rainbows, and it's all of a sudden tumultuous and violent and upheaval. That's what happens when he comes to the teaching of the Olivet Discourse. Everything else prior to this time has been relatively peaceful, but now comes this prophetic time of upheaval, and things that are happening in Revelation are things that he's predicted here, he's prophesied here. And he answers some questions directly, and others he asks indirectly. But as we study this, with the overviews to remember to help you understand this section, that Christ's answers to these unique questions are more to engage their caution than to satisfy their curiosity. Because some of the things he answers symbolically, others he answers perfectly. Remember then that some prophecies have manifold parts, just like it's often described as you see 2 mountains in the distance, and they're both very high, and they both look like they're right next to each other, but when you get closer, you'll find that there's just 20 miles between the 2 peaks. They look close, but they're not. Many events in prophecy are like that. So, if you want to follow along in Matthew 24, we're going to look at some of these things, the way he answers some of these questions. And it's a startling chapter. Really, all Scripture is worthy of our diligence. And all the Word of God should be handled carefully. Some books that are extremely difficult, like the Song of Solomon and the book of Revelation, should be handled perhaps more carefully than others, never endeavoring to shove your meaning in it. Once again, I tell you, there's things I do understand in this book, there's things I don't. And when I don't understand it, I'll tell you I don't know. It's that simple. There's things I know now I didn't know 10 years ago. Maybe there's things I don't know now I might know 10 years from now if I live that long. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We're moving along. When we get to heaven, we'll get these things answered. Let's follow along in Matthew 24, beginning in verse 1. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple. And his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. Let's stop there for a second. He departed from the temple. There's a sadness in that. The first time you see him in the temple is in Luke when he was 12 years old. He went in, he was answering the doctor's law questions. His parents were sorrowing looking for him. And his first recorded words of his youth were, "No, you're not, they must be about my Father's business." The temple was special to him, and he left it for the last time under sad conditions. He had cleansed it once, and he had to clean it again for people who were corrupting it, using it for money. I hate that. And Jesus wasn't very happy with it either. So he departed it for the last time. And his disciples came to show him the buildings of the temple. Now, what do you think it means by that? The buildings, plural. To understand what the first thing he says here, I have to understand that the great temple of Herod was one of the most magnificent buildings in the world at that time. Herod had been 40 years building, and it was still completed in construction during Jesus' day. It wasn't completely even done yet. And as if he needed to be shown the buildings. I mean, why would they show Jesus the buildings of the temple? He is the temple, you know. And Jesus said to them, verse 2, "See ye all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall be not left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." That's the first prophecy. That must have been a bombshell. And we've got to stop for a second to understand, take a little look at this temple and see how this must have hit. It was the most important thing in the world to the Jew, the great temple. There were 7 major Jewish feasts. If you made 3 trips to Jerusalem carefully, you could keep all 7 of them with 3 trips. It was the greatest building in all the world. It was absolutely magnificent. It was the pride of these Jews. But this wasn't the first time this had been said. Jesus was making a reference to a prophecy going back to Micah 3:12. This might have seemed very obscure. Can you imagine what anybody thought? Nobody thought anything when Micah spoke these words for the first time in public, or somebody read them. Micah was one of the minor prophets, 710 years before Christ. And he says this at the end of the 3rd chapter. "Therefore shall Zion, for your sake, be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountains of the houses, the high places of the forest. Plowed as a field." Somebody who heard him say, "What does that old coot say about it? What's he talking about? Plowed Jerusalem as a field." Remember that. Plowed as a field. Remember those words. Plowed as a field. Because you're going to hear them again from the lips of one of the world's great historians. So the Jews should have been used to that. I mean, the first tabernacle of Moses was dissipated and replaced by the Temple of Solomon, which David started and Solomon completed. And that was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And then you had Zerubbabel's temple rebuilt under Ezra and Nehemiah, and that was destroyed. And now you have the great temple of Herod, a magnificent structure. And for Jesus to say there won't be one stone left upon the other is an extraordinary thing. Particularly, Josephus records that the masonry in this building, and maybe I should start with showing you a couple of illustrations I brought. I'll show you the first one just shows, you can see this. This is a rendering of the front part of the temple. This is the temple complex. It's huge. This is the front of the temple itself. The holy place and the holy of holy places. This is the court of the priests. There's the altar with the 4 horns. And the courts of the priests, the courts of the Gentiles, the courts of the women. This shows some of the opulence of the front of this. But when I was teaching at Portsmouth Christian Academy, one of my students, his father worked at the American Embassy in Israel. And he knew I was doing a study on archaeology. He sent me this drawing produced by Hebrew University, which is the finest, most accurate rendering of what the temple looked like up to date. And it's really hard to see this whole thing. That big building I showed you there, that's right here. There's the Fortress of Antonio. All these were apartments. The great library that held scrolls for all the 12 tribes was in here. And these steps right here have been uncovered. This was 13 acres. Some of these stones were enormous. Josephus, Flavius Josephus, was a Jew, a Roman historian, wrote a 22-volume The Histories of Antiquity, one of the most respected historians in the history of the world. He's been proven to be accurate. And he describes this building. The front of the temple was covered with gold, and it faced east. And travelers would say if you were coming and you came up to that building when the sun was rising, I mean, your eyes couldn't see it. I thought about that today because I went out of the doctor's office after having those drops of dilate in my eyes. And you know how hot it was. The sun was shining off my white truck. And it just like, I hurt. I just had to close my eyes and turn away. I couldn't look at it. That's what it was like looking at the front of the temple. It was magnificent. But the stones. When I came in here today, I brought this with me. It's a tape measure. And Josephus describes some of the stones as 100 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 14 feet high. I measured this church at 65 feet from that wall to the end of this building. The ceiling is only 10 feet. Some of those stones are so big they would not fit in this room. And Jesus says not one of them will be left standing. A ludicrous, superlative, extraordinary prediction. Oh, how could that be? Not one of them? There's hundreds. There was this huge building covering 13 acres. Splendid. But like somebody said to you, the Washington Monument, down, not a stone left. The Lincoln Memorial, flat as a desert. The Capitol Building, gone. Jefferson Memorial, gone. All these buildings won't be one stone left upon the other. That just might be true. A new heaven and a new earth. It's going to be coming. Who knows? But when Titus, when he said this, it was about 33, 35 AD. This prophecy about the temple being destroyed was fulfilled in 70 AD. Roughly just 40 years after Jesus gave it. The Jews rebelled against Roman authority. Emperor Titus sent an army. He besieged Jerusalem for 2 years. And the Roman army hated the Jews. There was no love lost. And Titus issued a decree. He issued an order to his troops that Josephus recalls. Josephus had an in with the Roman army. He was a Jewish general. He led a revolt against the Romans. They beat him, but they respected his courage, his ability, and his intelligence so much that they took him into their being and called him Flavius Josephus, gave him a Roman name, and because of his gift for detail and history, commissioned him to write this history. So he records that Titus gave an order. He says, I don't want one stone left standing. I want it to look like nothing had ever been there before. And history records when they took siege, what they did, they built scaffolding, the Roman soldiers, scaffolding around all these walls. Scaffolding of wood. And they set them on fire. And the fire got so hot that it cracked those stones. And eventually they were all poured down into the rubble of the Kidron Valley. If you see the Wailing Wall, if you ever look at a picture of that, you notice the stones were all different colors, different kinds. It's the debris taken from all over, put up there. But not one stone was left standing. And Josephus records in his history that it looks as if the site had never been inhabited. If you looked at it, you would never think anything had ever been there in that 13 acres of that splendid temple. It was all gone. And the front of that temple, as you can see, was covered with gold, as I mentioned. And the heat from the fire, that was the heart of that temple, the temple complex, was the temple itself. The heat of the fire was so intense that it melted the gold, and the gold ran down in the cracks between the stones. Part of a Roman soldier's pay was not just his salary, which was given in salt, by the way. That's how we get the word salary, salt. Part of it was paid in salt. But the spoils of war, whatever you could carry away. And when that gold started melting and running down into cracks, the Roman soldiers were entirely motivated to move those stones to get the gold. So not one stone of the whole temple was left standing. A remarkable prophecy. But at the time it was given, remark this now, at the time it was given, people probably thought, even Christians probably thought, well, that's ridiculous. That's the great temple? Our holy building, look at the size of it, look at how big the stones are. Not one left, that's what happened. And when you see the prophecies that Christ is going to give here, coming up, and what he's saying in Revelation, and you've heard me say this about this book, a lot of things I don't understand about the fulfillment and how these things look out, but I can tell you 2 things about everything that's predicted in Revelation. Number 1, they're bad, and number 2, they're going to happen. Yeah, they're bad, they're awfully ugly, frightening, they're definitive, they're final. It is going to happen, that's all I need to know. But my belief is that we're raptured before this happens. I've told you before, that's what I believe right now. That the church goes up. After the 3rd chapter of Revelation, you never hear the word church again until after the close of the 20th chapter. But it's going to seem incredulous. Anything about God is incredulous. He's God. I get to thinking about him and I just have to stop. I can't fit it in my little brain. Verse 3. New paragraph. If you have a Bible that has a paragraph marked by indentation or a little backwards P with a dot in it, it indicates there's a new paragraph here. And for instance, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, that's why this is called the Mount, the Olivet Discourse. When he said, But they wanted to show him the buildings in verse 1. The best place in Jerusalem to see the temple was in Mount Olivet, because it's right across the valley. If you sit there, you can see the whole thing. You see the eastern gate and the temple and the courtyards and the colonnades and the fortress of Antonio and the great pillars and the court of the women and the court of the Gentiles, and the court of the Jews and the court of the priests and all the little parts of it, all the glory of it. So as he sat upon the Mount of Olives in verse 3, remember Mount Olivet is in that vicinity where he was crucified. It was in that vicinity where he ascended, and Zechariah prophesies he's coming back on that mountain. When he sets down on earth, that mountain's going to split in two. Remember, we talked about that. And Holiday and site engineers 40 years ago found a fault line going right down the middle of that mountain. It's ready to split right now when God says so. And thus that prophecy will be fulfilled. So Mount Olivet is a very special place. The Mount of Olives, olive trees were everywhere. They were scented. Word Gethsemane was in the location of Olivet. Gethsemane is the Hebrew word for an olive press, to squeeze the olives and bring the oil out of them. Christ was pressed, and he sweat, as it were, great drops of blood in Gethsemane with an anguish that we will never understand. But as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, well, listen to these questions. Tell us, when shall these things be? 3 questions. When is this going to happen? What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Wow. Now, this Olivet Discourse, the complete thing is found in Matthew 24 and 25. Shorter versions are found in Luke 21 and in Mark. And let me just see here. I had a little notation in Luke 21. Well, it'll be Luke 21, 12 to 24. And I probably should not go into that tonight for the sake of time. This is a long slide. I'm trying to condense it as I go along here to get the important parts of the Olivet Discourse and still do it justice. But when shall these things be? When's this all going to happen? What shall be the sign of thy coming? And first of all, the sign of thy coming. This is an important verse. Was coming back. They hadn't got the fact that he was leaving, but there's a significant verse in Hebrews 9:28 that I've always loved because it's pregnant with glorious promise. It's also theologically a very important Christian scripture on the subject of Christ's second coming, which is the next great glorious event in the history of this planet. His incarnation was the first. He was born, eternity, invented time, and split it in two. We can still feel the ripples in our blood from that moment. And then the second was his crucifixion, his resurrection, his ascension. The next on the list is his coming back. Hebrews 9:28. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. He will appear the second time. He said in John 14, a little farther on, just the night before he died, I go to prepare a place for you. If I go to prepare a place, I will come again and receive you unto myself. He told him many times he's coming back. And when he ascended, the angel says, he went in like manner, he's coming back in like manner. When shall these things be? What shall be the sign of the coming and of the end of the world? The end of the world, translating that in the Greek helps a little bit. It means the consummation of the age. This doesn't mean like when is the world going to be stopped. The world doesn't end. It's burned up, it's purified, it's transformed. Sin ends. The dominion of man over the earth ends. But it's not the end of the planet, it's the end of the age. And a careful look at the words there helps to explain that. And now Jesus starts to answer them. Now, as we begin these answers, remember some of them are very explicit, others are very vague. And the ones that are vague, he's made vague purposely. And I think I have a theory on why, and I'll come to that at the end of this chapter here. I think Mark does a better job of coming to the end of that chapter in Mark 13. What that means. But remember, I said already, his answers he gives here are more to engage their caution, to keep them ready for him coming, than they are to satisfy their curiosity. Jesus is not in the curiosity satisfaction business. There's many things he keeps mysterious for a good reason. He said to his disciples, I have many things to tell you, but you're not ready yet. You know, you can tell somebody something, and if you tell them at the wrong time, they're not going to get it. You know, I remember reading James Dobson's illustration of a little 3-year-old girl that came out to mommy and dad. She says, "Mommy, Dad, where did I come from?" And mommy and dad looked at each other and thought, well, I guess if she's old enough to ask the question, she's old enough to have some sort of an answer. They started to answer all the biological entities of childbirth. When they were all done, the little girl said, No, I mean, where was I born? They completely missed the question, you know. So you can give the right answer at the wrong time. And I think all wisdom is found in Christ. So, verse 4. Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no man deceive you." This is important because he says this 3 times. 3 times he watches about false teachers. "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." You know, and we that's been there all along. It's in our age today. We had the Moonies. Remember, son Young Moon claimed that he was the Messiah. And there's people before him, and there's people to come. And they draw people away who don't know the word. You know, one of the terms as a synonym for the Bible is the canon, C-A-N-O-N. To say something is biblical, say it's canonical. And canon was a word for a yardstick. It was a straight stick that had measuring style, like it's not a yardstick. It was used to tell whether something was straight or not, and to measure it. So it's a great term for the Bible. The Bible is the canon. It's a straight stick, and it measures what is and what isn't, what's right and what's wrong. I see some of the stuff in the news today of people whining about murderers and rapists and breaking the law and supporting it. You know, we have people in high places of government that don't know what's right and they don't know what's wrong. It's that simple. They've never learned, and they're probably never going to learn. They don't know what a lie is and what the truth is. And the Bible gives you that. And I heard Moody say one time in one of his writings that the best way to tell whether a stick is crooked or not is to lay it right alongside of a straight stick. So if somebody claims to be Christ, you can lay what their claims are. What did Jesus say? You know. And when you get this word in you, the word abides in you, and you're nourished, when you feed on it, when you read it, when you study it, it becomes like the food you eat, it becomes your cells. It filters your thinking, it determines your attitude, it colors your perception. It's the glasses through which you look at everything. That becomes. You're not going to be deceived. If the word of truth is in you, you will not be deceived. And he's warning them. Take heed that no man deceive you. And then verse 6 says, "You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." Well, that's a good one because the history of humanity, the history of this planet, is the history of wars. I mean, the first man born of a woman killed his brother. The first man born of a woman on this planet was a murderer, genocide over a religious dispute of what kind of a sacrifice was accepted. It's been the history of warfare, it still is today. And you have to put all the pieces together. During the beginning of World War I, through the part of it, hundreds of books were written about, here it is, world at war. Here's the scripture being fulfilled. It's the end of the world. World War II, wheelbarrows full of books were written by well-meaning pastors. Where you see the whole world's at war. We thought World War I, but here it is. This is it. This is the end of the world. No. You're going to hear rumors of wars, but the end's not yet. Because there's other things that have to happen. There's a lot of parts to the puzzle. Just because one of them is there doesn't mean the puzzle's done. And people do this. You have to look at everything. And, you know, as we go through the rest of the book of Revelation, we'll be able to look at where we are. You know, are we there yet, or we're getting close? We're really close. So, the end is not yet. And he says, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginnings of sorrows." Now, there's always been earthquakes, and there's always been famines, and there's always been pestilences. But he's talking about some of these things we saw beginning to happen in Revelation. Remember, well, Revelation 6, well, let me just see here. Let me see if I can do this quickly without getting bogged down and restarting things we've already gone over, but just bear with me just a second here. Starting with those 7 seals. Over the 7 seals in Revelation 6. Death and hell, a fourth part of the earth was killed. And then a third part of the trees and the grass, a third part of the creatures in the sea. Another fourth part of the world was, there's a huge decimation of the population. huge earthquakes in different places, pestilences, a concentrated, quick happening of things. They're unlike anything we've seen now. Jesus says that a little further on. This shall be a tribulation not like you've ever seen before. So if we've seen it before, it can't be this. It can't be World War II or World War I. They're the beginning of the sorrows. 2 Timothy 3:13 speaks of the age of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of nations for all my sake. And then shall many of them be offended, and shall betray one another, hate one another, and many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. Because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. You've heard me say in our Sunday morning sermons that human love is diseased, it's counterfeit, it's bankrupt, it's riddled with ignorance, with sin, with selfishness. It's not based upon the things of God, it's based more upon Hollywood. There's iniquity is abounding. Is iniquity abounding? Is there more iniquity today than there were 20 years ago? What do you think? I think if some of our founding fathers were transported to our culture today, they'd roll over in the grave. The things that are happening and how things are erupting. But they that endure to the end the same shall be saved. Now this is where it gets hard because of the layers here. In verse 9, they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, shall kill you, shall be hated of nations for my name's sake. That has been partially fulfilled back during the times of the Jews, and partially fulfilled during levels of persecution, the papal persecutions. The Pope, the Vatican, murdered over 50 million people over the course of 1,200 years, when the papacy really was the greatest kingdom. Remember, that's the beast that was slain and grew back again. We talked about the last time we were talking about this. This has already happened partially. It's been partially fulfilled, but the complete fulfillment is yet to come. His answers here sometimes are intentionally vague. They're truth, but it doesn't give you the time and the day. And there's a good reason for that. Verse 14, and the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. The word end here involves more of a process than an event. The beginning of the end. This gospel of the kingdom could be a synonymous for the Bible. Preach it all over the world for a witness. Now, I've referenced this a couple times before, up to about 4 or 5 years ago. You have Tyndale, you have Wycliffe, you have missionary organizations, Bible translators working all over the world, translating the Bible. There's thousands of languages and dialects. And the estimation from Tyndale and from Wycliffe about 10 years ago, from missionaries that I know in Papua New Guinea who are translating the dialects there, was that it would probably be 50 to 100 years before they had it all translated. As of 2 years ago, it's down to 10 years. Did you hear that? Mm. Because of technology, because of advanced technological ability to translate languages. You've seen these phones, you can just have them speak the language. Tell them, well, you speak English, and they'll translate it for you. I mean, technology is accelerating so fast that this time here, now it shall be preached in all the world. Now that means in all nations, not necessarily all individuals. For a witness, I'm not sure if that's really relevant what Luke said in Luke 3:6. When he says, all flesh shall see the salvation of God. When you see the printed page here, you're seeing the salvation of God. When your eyes fall upon John chapter 11, verses 25 to 26 that I quoted at the beginning of the service, where Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. He that was dead, believe shall never die. Do you believe this? You know, you're going to see it when you look at his word. And then shall the end come. Well, we're getting close to that. And I referenced this before in one of my messages, how I remember hearing from a missionary in India. India's got some of the densest jungles left anywhere in the world, and probably more languages. It goes back and forth between China and India. Right now, India is like 1.44 billion people. It has more people than any other nation in the world, and more languages. And China is right behind it, in second place. And I heard a missionary talk going into the interior jungles in India. He came across a village, and he was flummoxed to see these natives watching reruns of American comedy sitcoms on a black and white television powered by a bicycle-driven generator in the middle of the jungle. You see how the signals can be transported, how we can penetrate, how we're not very far technologically from having the gospel. The word preach there, caruso, in Greek means to declare, to proclaim, to make known. There's so many different ways to do that. This has changed the timetable, I think. There's this thing, well, we're looking at 100 years, not anymore, we're not. And other things are changing too. Verse 15, wherefore, when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. The abomination of desolation is spoken of, this is where we have to go back to Daniel for a couple of things. And while I'm on Daniel 9, I think I'll do Daniel 12:1. These prophecies in Daniel are amongst the most outstanding, mysterious, deep of anywhere in the Bible. And in when Jesus, for example, says, well, I'll come to that when it talks about the great tribulation in Daniel 12:1. It says, at that time shall Michael stand up, the great church will stand up for the children of thy people, the Jews. There shall be a time of trouble as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be written in the book of life. Astonishing from Daniel. In Daniel 9, he speaks of the abomination of desolation. If I'm going to do this right, there's so many words I got to take apart and tell you what they mean here, but this was partially fulfilled in 170 BC. In 170 BC, Antiochus conquered Jerusalem. And he went into the temple, and he set up an altar to Jupiter in the Jewish temple. And he sacrificed a pig upon the altar, mixed with blood and the broth of a pig. As much of an abomination as you can do, defiling the blood, which was holy, defiling the altar, defiling the holy place in the temple. And that was an abomination of desolation. It's a type and a picture of what's going to happen farther on when the Antichrist comes. It makes a false treaty. Remember that white horse, a false peace. A false treaty with Israel for peace. Then he himself will violate it. There's many references to the temple has to be built again before all these events happen. And my son and I were talking about that about a year ago. I said, that's got to happen. He says, you're right, it does. According to what Jesus prophesied, the Father on, that has to happen. The temple has to be built. All the materials for building the temple are already there. They're all done. They've been done for years. Just like David assembled all the parts of the temple and Solomon built it. Jewish groups that are zealous to restore the temple in Israel to the Jewish people have for years have sheds filled with the stones, with the labors, the flesh hooks, the menorahs, the tongs, everything that is needed. And with the construction techniques today and materials today, all they need is an altar. They don't have to have 13 acres. They need some place to sacrifice. The sacrifice is the heart of that temple. And they can do that in a week. Now, how fast you can put a building up around here today? How fast you can raise a building? I mean, you can do it in nothing flat. So this thing could happen really quickly when it happens. It could go up really fast. How are we doing on time? Well, I'm going to have to... let's see. Verse 21, there shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, to this time, no, nor ever shall be. That's what Daniel said, Daniel 12:1, that nothing like it. Except those days should be shortened, no flesh should be shaved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Remember, that second part of the tribulation is only 3.5 years. Tribulation is 7 years altogether. And certain things happen in the first three, the 1,260 days, the 1,240 days. And then certain things happen in the second part of it. Again, verse 24, there shall be many false prophets, show great signs and wonders, insomuch, if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. If it were possible to deceive the elect. We are at 7:12 now, and I have a lot of things in a prayer list here. I'm really getting excited about some things that are coming next year. where the equals are going to be gathered together. No, I can't do this right. We have to stop here. I'll have to make this a 2-week thing. I'm just going to do the 24th chapter, but I'm up to like verse 22, and we've got like 28 verses to go. And I'm not going to do a hatchet job. We'll just stop this now, make a note here, because next week we'll also look at some of the things that are included in Mark and Luke that aren't included in Matthew. Remember, in the Synoptic Gospels, sin as in synonymous in the same way. Optic is seen. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are pretty much all the same thing. John is different. They all describe, they give pieces of this. Matthew gives the most of it. Mark and Luke give parts of it, but they add certain little details that are in Mark and Luke that are not in Matthew. And I'll endeavor to piecemeal those together as we study. We're coming into some exciting things. And I think the most interesting things about the Olivet Discourse are what we're going to talk about next week. Particularly a couple of things that Jesus taught on that are breathtaking. They're stunning. Every time I read them, I just get so excited. But it's a hot night, and I don't want to keep you here at midnight. So we'll pick up on that. Praise God.